December 31st of 1944, 27,000 feet above the frozen German countryside. The sky is burning. First Lieutenant Glenn H. Rojohn grips the control yoke of his B-17G Flying Fortress, knuckles white beneath his leather gloves. Through the cockpit windscreen, all he can see is black. Not the black of night, it's barely past noon, but the black of explosive death, blooming in angry flowers of steel and fire across the winter sky. Flak. Hundreds of 88mm shells detonating in a continuous curtain of destruction, each burst capable of shredding aluminum skin and human flesh with equal efficiency. Jesus Christ, mutters Second Lieutenant Robert E. Smith from the co-pilot's seat, his voice crackling through the intercom. They're really throwing up the welcome mat today. Rojohn doesn't respond. He's too focused on holding his B-17 tail number 43-38635, nicknamed Mi Amigo, steady in the bomber stream. Around him, 36 other flying fortresses, from the 100th bomb brute, thunder through the maelstrom. Each aircraft carrying 8,000 pounds of high explosive and incendiary bombs destined for the oil refineries at Hamburg, the refineries that keep the Luftwaffe flying. The refineries that the Allied High Command has marked for obliteration on this, the final day of 1944. The formation is tight. It has to be. Tight formations mean concentrated defensive firepower from the hundreds of 50 caliber machine guns bristling from every B-17. Tight formations mean better bombing accuracy. But tight formations also mean there's nowhere to run when the flak starts bursting and the German fighters come screaming in. And they're coming. Bandits, 2 o'clock high. The shout explodes through the intercom from Staff Sergeant Michael Sawinski in the top turret. His twin 50s are already traversing, tracking the dark shapes diving out of the sun. Focke-Wulf, 195 of them, maybe 6 rolling into attack position with practiced precision. The entire bomber shudders as Sawinski opens fire, spent 50 caliber casings rattling across the fuselage floor like deadly brass rain. The sound is deafening, even through Rojohn's leather helmet. All around Mi Amigo, the other B-17s in the formation are erupting in fire too, their machine guns creating a deadly crossfire that any attacking fighter must thread to reach them. A Focke-Wulf flashes past the windscreen, so close Rojohn can see the yellow nose paint and the black crosses on its wings. Cannon shells from the German fighter walk up the left wing of the B-17, flying just ahead and to the port side. The bomber, someone's fortress, someone's crew staggers in the air like a boxer taking a combination to the ribs. One engine trails black smoke immediately. Stay with the formation. Rojohn orders through the intercom, though he's talking to himself as much as his crew. Hold it steady. Technical Sergeant William R. Leake, the flight engineer standing between the pilot's seats, reaches forward to adjust the throttle settings, compensating for the turbulence from the prop wash of the bombers ahead. The kid, Leake, is only 20, has steady hands. Rojohn appreciates that. You need steady hands when the sky is trying to kill you. Another flak burst erupts directly ahead, so close that the concussion wave rocks Mi Amigo like a toy. Shrapnel peppers the nose section with a sound like hail on a tin roof. In the bombardier's position below and ahead of the pilots, Second Lieutenant Harold Fisher doesn't even flinch. He's hunched over the northern bomb site, making minute adjustments. Preparing for the bomb run that's still 20 minutes away. 20 minutes that might as well be 20 hours. The German fighters make another pass. This time it's Messerschmitt 109 coming in from the rear, targeting the vulnerable tail sections. Technical Sergeant Robert Mayfield, in Mi Amigo's tail gun position, swings his twin 50s around and lets loose a sustained burst. Traces arc out behind the bomber, reaching for the German fighters like angry red fingers. Got one smoking. Mayfield's voice is triumphant through the intercom. He's breaking off. But for every German fighter driven away, 2 more seem to appear. The Luftwaffe is throwing everything they have at this raid. They know what's at stake. Without the Hamburg refineries, without fuel, the entire German war machine grinds to a halt. Rojohn checks his instruments. Airspeed, 180 miles per hour. Altitude, 27,000 feet. Oil pressure, normal on all 4 right cyclone engines. Hydraulic pressure, green. The B-17 is a tough airplane. They call it the Flying Fortress for a reason. But tough doesn't mean invincible. Every mission is a roll of the dice, and the odds get worse every time you climb into the cockpit. This is Rojohn's 28th mission. 2 more after this, and he'll have completed his tour. 2 more missions, and he can go home, back to the States, back to life, without flak and fighters, and watching good men die in burning airplanes. If he survives today, the formation drones on toward Hamburg, deeper into Germany, deeper into danger. The other B-17 formations from the 100th Bomb Group are spread across the sky. The 349th, 350th, and 351st Squadrons, each with their own target approach vectors. Somewhere up ahead, the lead bombardiers are making their calculations, checking their maps, preparing to guide the entire group to the target. A new voice crackles through the intercom. "Pilot, this is Ball Turret. Got a B-17 below us, about 4 o'clock low. She's in bad shape. 2 engines out, losing altitude." Rojohn glances down through the side window. He can just make out the wounded bomber, maybe 2,000 feet below, dropping slowly out of formation like a wounded bird leaving the flock. That's a death sentence. Alone, without the protection of the formation's massed guns, the German fighters will tear it apart. But there's nothing he can do. No one can leave formation to help. The mission comes first, always. "Keep your eyes on our sector," Rojohn orders. "We've got our own problems." And they do. Because the flak is getting thicker, the fight is more aggressive, and Hamburg is still 15 minutes away. 15 minutes of flying through hell with nothing but thin aluminum and hope keeping them alive. Technical Sergeant Leek taps Rojohn on the shoulder and points to port side. Another B-17, this one from their own squadron, is pulling up dangerously close. Too close. The pilot must be fighting battle damage or wounded crew. Because the bomber is wallowing, its course erratic. "Watch that guy," Smith mutters from the right seat. "He's all over the sky." The other B-17 Rojohn can just make out its tail number. 43-38172 is indeed unstable, yawing left and right as its pilot struggles for control. It's maybe 50 feet away now, in perfect position, but flying like a drunk. The prop wash from both bombers is creating dangerous turbulence between them. "Give him room," Rojohn says, easing Mi Amigo slightly to starboard. The last thing they need is a mid-air collision in the middle of a flak barrage. But the other B-17 isn't moving away. If anything, it's drifting closer. And that's when everything goes wrong. It happens in less than 2 seconds, but Glenn Rojohn will replay those seconds in his mind for the rest of his life. The other B-17 43-38172 suddenly lurches upward, its pilot overcorrecting or perhaps hit by a violent gust from the prop wash. The bomber's nose pitches up sharply, climbing directly into Mi Amigo's flight path. Rojohn sees it happening, sees the massive bomber rising toward him like a breaching whale, all 65 feet of wingspan and 65,000 pounds of metal and explosives coming up fast. "Brake right," Smith shouts. There's no time. Rojohn hauls back on the yoke instinctively, trying to climb over the rising bomber. But Mi Amigo is already at full power, already carrying 8,000 pounds of bombs, already fighting the thin air at 27,000 feet. The B-17 responds sluggishly, nose coming up, but not fast enough, not nearly fast enough. The top of 43-38172 slams into Mi Amigo's belly with a grinding, tearing shriek of aluminum on aluminum. The impact throws Rojohn forward against his harness hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs. The entire airplane shudders and bucks like a wild animal. Warning lights flash across the instrument panel in a cascade of red. The control yoke goes mushy in Rojohn's hands, not dead, but wrong, all wrong. We're hit. Someone is shouting through the intercom, the voice distorted by panic or damaged equipment. But the nightmare isn't over. The collision has disrupted the carefully balanced forces, keeping both bombers aloft. Instead of bouncing apart, the two B-17s grind together, 43-38172's fuselage scraping along Mi Amigo's underside with a sound like the world's largest chainsaw. Metal tears. Rivets pop. The smell of aviation fuel suddenly floods the cockpit, sharp, acrid, terrifying. And, impossibly, the grinding stops. Not because the bombers have separated, but because they've locked together. The other B-17 is now wedged beneath Mi Amigo, its fuselage jammed up against the bomb bay doors, its tail section extending back under Mi Amigo's own tail. The two aircraft are stuck together in an obscene mechanical embrace, tumbling through the sky at 27,000 feet over enemy territory. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Smith breathes, his face ghost white in the harsh sunlight streaming through the windscreen. We're locked together. Rojohn's mind races through the implications even as he fights the controls. The aerodynamics are all wrong now. Mi Amigo's 4 engines are trying to push both bombers forward, but 43-3 8172's engines, Rojohn can see 3 of them still windmilling, are creating drag and thrust in unpredictable directions. The 2 aircraft are yawing sickeningly to the left, nose dropping, altitude bleeding, away at 500 feet per minute, and they're both still carrying their bomb loads. Bombardier pilot, Rojohn shouts into the intercom. Fisher, are the bomb bay doors damaged? A pause that lasts forever. Then, negative pilot, doors are jammed. Bombs are still armed. And I can see daylight through the floor. We've got holes in the bay. Of course, there are holes. The other B-17's fuselage is jammed up against the bomb bay. Any movement could trigger the bombs. Any explosion could detonate 16,000 pounds of high explosives, 8,000 from each aircraft, in one catastrophic fireball that would vaporize both crews and scatter debris across 10 square miles of German countryside. Altitude? Rojohn demands. 26,000, Leak replies, reading the altimeter. 25,5, still dropping. Around them, the rest of the bomber formation is pulling away, continuing on toward Hamburg. They have to. The mission continues even when individual aircraft are lost. That's the brutal mathematics of strategic bombing. But now, Mi Amigo and 43-3 8172 are falling out of formation, dropping back into the zone where the German fighters hunt. Through the side window, Rojohn catches a glimpse of the other bomber's cockpit, so close he can see the pilot fighting his own controls. The man's face is contorted with effort and fear. Their eyes meet for just a second. 2 pilots, 2 strangers, locked in this nightmare together. Can you see their tail number? Rojohn asks. Get me identification on that aircraft. Staff Sergeant Sawinski, still in the top turret, has the best view. It's a bird from the 350th Squadron, sir. I can see. Looks like tail number 172. That's Captain Harry F. Skogsberg's ship. Call sign All-American. Skogsberg. Rojohn doesn't know the man, but the name is enough. There are 10 men aboard that B-17, 10 men whose lives are now inextricably linked with Mi Amigo's crew. 20 men total, stuck together in a falling death trap. Radio, pilot, Rojohn calls to Technical Sergeant Arthur S. Chester in the radio room. Get on the command frequency. Tell them we've had a mid-air collision. We're locked together. Both aircraft compromised. Roger, pilot. Transmitting now. But what can anyone do? The other bombers can help them. The fighter escort P-51 Mustangs that are supposed to be protecting the bomber stream are engaged with German fighters miles away. Mi Amigo and 43-3 8172 are on their own, falling slowly through hostile skies, carrying enough explosive power to level a city block. The aircraft shudder again, a different sensation this time. Rojohn feels it through the yoke the other B-17 is trying to maneuver, its pilot attempting to break them apart. It's the logical thing to try, the only thing to try, but the movement sends both bombers into a sickening roll to the left. He's trying to pull away, Smith shouts. Tell him to stop, he's going to roll us. But there's no way to communicate with the other aircraft. Their radio frequencies might be different, or the radios might be damaged. All Rojohn can do is fight his own controls, applying right rudder and right aileron, trying to counteract the roll before it becomes unrecoverable. The horizon tilts crazily through the windscreen. Sky, ground, sky, ground. Rojohn can see the patchwork German countryside far below, white with snow, stitched with roads and rivers, and the occasional town, so far down, too far to survive if they have to bail out over enemy territory. Even if they could bail out, even if jumping wouldn't mean abandoning the men in the other bomber to certain death. Altitude 24,000, Leak reports, his voice steady despite the chaos. Rate of descent increasing, 800 feet per minute. The simple mathematics are brutal. At this rate, they have 30 minutes before they hit the ground. 30 minutes to figure out how to separate two locked bombers, stabilize their flight, and somehow survive long enough to make it back to friendly territory. Or 30 minutes to live.
Rojohn takes a breath, forces his mind to slow down, to think clearly. He's trained for this well, not this exactly. Nobody trains for two bombers locked together in midair, but he's trained for emergencies, for the moment when everything goes wrong and panic wants to take over. All crew, pilot, he says into the intercom, keeping his voice as calm as he can manage. Listen up. We are locked together with another B-17. We are losing altitude. We still have our bombs aboard. I need damage reports from every station, and I need them now. Navigator, plot me the fastest course to friendly territory. Engineer, give me engine status. Everybody else, stay sharp and stay calm. We're gonna figure this out. The responses come back one by one. Tail Gunner Mayfield reports his position is intact, but he can see the other B-17's tail just feet below his own turret. Ball Turret Gunner reports he's tracked, can't rotate the turret with the other aircraft jammed beneath it. The Waist Gunners report structural damage to the fuselage, but no injuries. And then Bombardier Fisher's voice comes through, tight with tension. Pilot, Bombardier, I can see into their bomb bay through the damage. Their bombs are still armed too. And they're shifting. If those break loose, he doesn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knows what happens if 16,000 pounds of armed bombs start moving around in damaged bomb bays. They'll have maybe 2 seconds of warning before the explosion turns both B-17 seconds into a brief, bright fireball in the December sky. Through the windscreen, Rojohn can see a German fighter, a Messerschmitt 109, circling at a distance, watching. The pilot is probably radioing the other Luftwaffe fighters, calling them in for an easy kill. 2 damaged bombers, falling out of formation, unable to maneuver effectively. Target practice. Gunners, stay alert, Rojohn orders. They'll be coming for us. But even as he says it, he knows the truth. If the German fighters attack now, if they pour cannon shells into these 2 locked bombers, it won't just be damage, it'll be detonation. The fighters probably know that too. They're waiting, watching, hoping these 2 American bombers will simply tear themselves apart without wasting German ammunition. The altimeter continues its relentless unwinding. 23,000 feet, 22.5. Rojohn looks over at Smith. The co-pilot is working the rudder pedals, helping maintain what little control they have. Their eyes meet, and no words are necessary. They both know the situation is desperate. But desperate isn't hopeless. Not yet. All right, Rojohn says, mostly to himself. Let's see if we can fly this thing. The first rule of flying a damaged bomber is simple. Maintain control. The second rule is simpler still. Don't make it worse. But Glenn Rojohn is facing a situation that defies every rule, every procedure, every hour of training he's ever received. He's trying to fly 2 B-17s that are locked together, each weighing over 30 tons, each with its own engines providing thrust in different directions, each with a crew of 10 men whose lives depend on his next decision. Engineer, give me power settings, Rojohn orders, his hands never leaving the yoke. I need to know exactly what thrust we're getting from our engines and what their engines are doing. Technical Sergeant Leek is already scanning the instruments and peering out the side window at the other B-17 wedged beneath them. Our 4 engines are all running, sir. Full power on all. Their number 2 engine looks dead propellers feathered. Number 1 is at partial power, judging by the prop pitch. 3 and 4 look like they're running full. Rojohn processes this information quickly. The asymmetric thrust from the other bomber's engines is creating a constant left-turning tendency. That's why they're yawing. That's why holding the aircraft steady feels like wrestling an alligator. Smith, I need you on the rudder trim, Rojohn says to his co-pilot. Give me full right rudder trim, then we'll adjust from there. Roger. Smith's hand moves to the trim wheel, cranking it clockwise. The pressure on Rojohn's legs eases slightly as the trim tabs adjust, helping counteract the yaw. Better, Rojohn says. Little better. Now let's see if we can stop this descent. But that's the real problem. 2 B-17s locked together have a completely different flight envelope than a single bomber. The aerodynamics are chaotic, turbulent air from Mi Amigo's propellers is hitting the other aircraft's wings and tail, reducing lift. The extra weight and drag mean they need more power to maintain altitude, but more power creates more prop wash, more turbulence, more instability. It's a vicious cycle, and they're losing altitude at 900 feet per minute now. Bombardier pilot Rojohn calls. Can you jettison our bombs safely? There's a long pause. Too long. Then Fisher's voice comes back, strained. Negative, sir. The bomb bay doors are jammed shut by their fuselage. If I blow the doors, we might tear both aircraft apart. And even if the doors open, sir, their bombs are right below ours. If ours fall, they'll hit theirs. And, boom, the word hangs unspoken in the air. Rojohn grits his teeth. Understood. Bombs stay aboard. It's insane. They're trying to fly 2 damaged bombers carrying a combined load of 16,000 pounds of high explosives, any of which could detonate if jarred too hard. They're over enemy territory, descending toward anti-aircraft gun range, with German fighters circling. And they can't bail out because opening the hatches and moving around might shift the weight distribution enough to tear the aircraft apart. They're trapped in a flying coffin that could become a bomb at any second. Altitude 21,000, Leak reports. Rate of descent holding at 900 feet per minute. 900 feet per minute. Rojohn does the math in his head. They crossed into German airspace at 27,000 feet. If they maintain this descent rate, they'll be below 10,000 feet, where the cold German air holds enough oxygen to breathe without the masks they're wearing in about 12 minutes. But 10,000 feet is also prime altitude for light flak and small arms fire. Every German soldier with a rifle will be shooting at them. And they still have to cross over 100 miles of enemy territory to reach Allied lines. Navigator pilot. Rojohn calls to Second Lieutenant John C. Foley in the navigator station. What's our heading for the shortest route out of Germany? 270 degrees, sir, Foley responds immediately. Due west. But that takes us directly over the industrial Ruhr Valley, heavy flak concentrations. Of course it does. The Ruhr Valley, the industrial heartland of Germany, is the most heavily defended piece of airspace in the world. The Germans have packed it with anti-aircraft guns until you could practically walk across them. Flying through there at low altitude, barely able to maneuver, would be suicide. Give me an alternate route, Rojohn says, something that avoids the worst of the flak. Working on it, sir. Through the windscreen, Rojohn can see the rest of the bomber formation far ahead now. Small, dark shapes against the winter sky, continuing toward Hamburg. They're on their own now, truly alone. The other bombers have a mission to complete. History won't remember them if they turn back to help. History only remembers the bombs that hit the target. Another shudder runs through both aircraft. This time, Rojohn feels it coming from below. The other B-17 is trying something. Maybe Skogsberg is attempting to adjust his power settings, trying to help stabilize their joined flight. Or maybe something's failing in his aircraft, more damage manifesting. I see movement in their cockpit, Smith says, peering down through the side window. Looks like Skogsberg's waving at us. He's pointing down? What's he trying to say? Rojohn leans over, trying to get a view of the other pilot. Yes, Skogsberg is gesturing, pointing downward with exaggerated movements. What does he want? Is something wrong with his lower fuselage? Is he suggesting they descend faster? Then, Rojohn understands. He wants to know if we can see how badly we're stuck together. He can't see the connection point from his cockpit. Leak, can you get a visual? Rojohn asks his flight engineer. Technical Sergeant Leak moves aft, squeezing past the pilot's seats, heading for a better vantage point. 30 seconds pass, a minute. Every second feels like an hour. Finally, Leak's voice crackles through the intercom. Sir, I can see it from the waist gunner position. Their fuselage is wedged up against our bomb bay, right behind the ball turret. Looks like their top turret housing is jammed into our bomb bay doors. There's structural damage, bent metal, torn skin. But it's not just stuck, sir. It's locked. The wreckage is interlocked, like teeth. Like a zipper that's jammed. Rojohn closes his eyes for a moment, processing this. If the aircraft are mechanically interlocked, not just pressed together, then separating is going to require more than just pulling in different directions. It might require cutting metal, or breaking structural members, or maneuvers so violent that they risk destroying both aircraft. Can they pull down and away? Smith asks. If they dive and we climb? If they try to dive aggressively, they'll rip their entire top section off, Leak replies. and probably take our bomb bay and ball turret with them. The interlocking is holding both aircraft together, but it's also holding both aircraft together, if you catch my meaning. It's structural now. We're one airplane until we can figure out how to become two again. One airplane, 20 men, 16,000 pounds of high explosives, falling through hostile skies. Altitude 19,000, Leek calls out, resuming his position at the engineer station. 18.5. Descent rate is increasing. We're at 1,000 feet per minute now. The thicker air at lower altitude should be helping them fly, but the increased drag from two locked bombers is overwhelming any benefit. They're still dropping like a stone, a very slow stone, but a stone nonetheless. Rojohn glances at the fuel gauges. They've been flying for over an hour already, and the engines are gulping fuel at a tremendous rate, trying to keep both bombers aloft. Even if they solve the problem of being locked together, they might not have enough fuel to make it back to England. One problem at a time. Navigator, where's that alternate route? Sir, I have it, Foley responds. Heading 285 degrees will take us north of the Ruhr Valley and toward the Netherlands. Less flak, but it's 50 miles longer. We'll be crossing the front lines near Arnhem. Arnhem, where Operation Market Garden had failed so bloodily just 3 months ago, where Allied paratroopers had been slaughtered trying to capture a bridge too far. The area is still crawling with German troops, but at least it's not the concentrated flak batteries of the Ruhr. Give me the heading, Rojohn says. 285 degrees. Smith, help me turn this thing. Turning is another challenge entirely. The joined aircraft want to yaw, want to roll, want to do anything except maintain coordinated flight. Rojohn and Smith work together, easing the yoke to the right, adding power to the right outboard engine, reducing power slightly on the left, using every trick they know to coax the mechanical monstrosity into a gentle turn. The compass slowly crawls around. 270 degrees, 275, 280. The aircraft shudders and protests, but the turn continues. 285 degrees. On course, Foley confirms. Altitude 17,000, Leek adds. Still descending, 17,000 feet. They've lost 10,000 feet since the collision. At this rate, they'll be at ground level in 17 minutes. Think, Rojohn tells himself. Think, what would reduce the descent rate? More power, but they're already at full power. Less drag, but they can't change the fact that they're two aircraft stuck together. Dump weight, but they can't drop the bombs. And everything else aboard, the ammunition, the equipment, even the crew themselves, doesn't weigh enough to make a difference. Unless... How much fuel are we carrying? Rojohn asks suddenly. Leek checks the gauges. Just under 2,000 gallons total, sir. About 12,000 pounds. 12,000 pounds. More than the bomb load. And unlike the bombs, fuel can be jettisoned without blowing them all to kingdom come. Can we dump fuel? Rojohn asks. We can, Leek says slowly, understanding dawning in his voice. The fuel dump valves are operational. But sir, if we dump fuel, we won't have enough to make it back to England. We'd have to land somewhere closer. Much closer. One problem at a time. Rojohn repeats. If we don't stop this descent, we won't need to worry about where to land. Start dumping fuel from the outboard tanks. We need to lose weight. Roger, sir. Dumping fuel. Leek's hands move across the panel, opening the dump valves. Behind and below the aircraft, precious aviation gasoline begins streaming out into the slipstream, atomizing into a fine mist that dissipates in the freezing air. 12,000 pounds of fuel they might desperately need, later pouring away into the German sky. But it works. Slowly, gradually, the rate of descent begins to decrease. 1,000 feet per minute becomes 900, 800, 750. It's working, Smith exclaims. We're slowing the descent. Rojohn allows himself the briefest moment of hope. Maybe they can do this. Maybe they can keep these two broken birds in the air long enough to reach Allied territory. Maybe fighters. The shout from Tail Gunner Mayfield cuts through the intercom like a knife. 3 o'clock high! Multiple bandits! Looks like 4! No, 5 of them! Messerschmitt's inbound. And just like that, hope evaporates. The German fighters have been circling, waiting, and now they're coming in for the kill. The Messerschmitt 109 comes screaming down out of the sun like hawks on wounded prey, their Daimler-Benz engines howling as they dive. 5 of them, maybe 6. It's hard to count. When they're moving that fast, spreading into an attack formation designed to overwhelm the bomber's defensive guns. "All gunners, free fire!" Rojohn shouts into the intercom. "Engage at will!" The B-17 erupts with the staccato hammering of 50 caliber machine guns. Staff Sergeant Sawinski in the top turret swings his twin 50s toward the lead fighter. Tracers arc out across the sky, red streaks reaching for the German aircraft. The waist gunners, Staff Sergeants Paul D. Byers and Edward D. Woolen are firing too, their guns poking out of the side windows, filling the air with lead. The first Messerschmitt flashes past, so close that Rojohn can see the pilot's leather helmet in the cockpit. Cannon shells from the fighter's nose guns walk across Mi Amigo's right wing, punching holes in the aluminum skin. One shell hits the number 3 engine, cowling with a bright spark. But miraculously, the engine keeps running. "He's coming around for another pass," Mayfield yells from the tail position. But the other Messerschmitts aren't waiting. They're coming in from different angles now, high, low, from the sides, trying to find the gaps in the B-17's defensive fire. It's a coordinated attack, professional, deadly. These aren't rookie pilots. These are veterans who've been hunting American bombers for years. Another fighter bores in from 2 o'clock level. This one's more cautious, hanging back at a distance, firing long-range bursts from its machine guns. Bullets stitch across Mi Amigo's nose section. The plexiglass windscreen directly in front of Rojohn suddenly spiderwebs with cracks as a round impacts it, but the laminated glass holds, just barely. Jesus! Smith flinches away from his side of the windscreen as more rounds pepper the nose. Rojohn fights the urge to take evasive action, to throw the bomber into violent maneuvers that might shake the fighters off. But he can't. Any aggressive maneuvering might tear the 2 locked aircraft apart, or worse, cause the bombs to shift and detonate. They're helpless. A slow-moving target that can only rely on their gunners to drive the fighters away. The ball turret under Mi Amigo's belly is still jammed, unable to rotate with the other B-17 wedged beneath it. That means there's a huge blind spot directly below and behind them. The German pilots will figure that out quickly, if they haven't already. A third Messerschmitt rolls in from 6 o'clock low, coming up underneath where the ball turret should be protecting them. Mayfield in the tail tries to depress his guns low enough to engage, but the fighter is too far below his angle of fire. "Can't reach him," Mayfield shouts. "He's in the blind spot." The fighter pilot knows it too. He pulls up confidently, closing to point-blank range, maybe 100 yards, and lets loose with everything he has. The entire tail section of Mi Amigo shudders under the impact of 20mm cannon shells and machine gun rounds. Metal tears, something explodes in the aft fuselage, probably an oxygen bottle or hydraulic line. "We're hit back here." One of the waist gunners, Byers, Rojohn thinks his voice tight with pain or fear. "We've got damage to the tail section. Elevator controls feel loose." Rojohn tests the elevator, pushing the yoke forward and back. There's definitely more play than there should be. The control cables running back to the tail have been damaged, possibly severed partially. If they lose elevator control completely, they won't be able to control pitch. They'll be unable to keep the nose up. They'll spiral into the ground. "How bad?" Rojohn demands. "Hard to tell, sir," Byers responds. "I can see daylight through new holes in the fuselage, and there's hydraulic fluid spraying from a line, but the cables look intact. For now. For now. That's all they have. Everything is, for now, holding together through sheer luck and the B-17's legendary toughness." The Messerschmitts circle around for another attack. Rojohn can see them out the side windows, maintaining their distance, conferring probably over their radios, planning their next move. They're not pressing the attack as aggressively as they could. Why? Then he understands. The German pilots can see the 2 B-17 seconds are stuck together. They can see the damage, see the desperate situation. They're being cautious because they know these bombers are flying bombs. If they score a direct hit on the bomb bay, if they detonate those 16,000 pounds of high explosives, the German fighters will be caught in the blast radius too. So they're being methodical, targeting the engines, the tail section, the wings, trying to disable the bombers without triggering a catastrophic explosion that will kill everyone, German and American alike. It's almost sporting, almost honorable, but it's still deadly. "Altitude 15,000, Lee calls out. Descent rate 700 feet per minute. Fuel dump still in progress. but we've lost about 800 gallons already. 800 gallons gone. 800 gallons they'll never get back. But it's keeping them in the air. That's worth everything. The lead Messerschmitt comes in again, this time from 12 o'clock high, diving straight down at the cockpit. It's a head-on attack, the most dangerous kind for the fighter pilot, because he's flying directly into the concentrated fire of the bomber's nose guns and top turret. But it's also the attack that terrorizes bomber pilots the most. Watching an enemy fighter boring in directly at your windscreen, cannon blazing, with nowhere to hide, Rojohn watches the fighter grow larger in the cracked windscreen. He can see the muzzle flashes from the fighter's guns, see the yellow spinner on the propeller, see every rivet on the cowling. Time seems to slow down. This is how it ends, he thinks. This is how we die. Then the fighter's windscreen explodes in a shower of glass and blood. Sawinski's twin 50s have found their mark. The Messerschmitt's nose drops violently, and the fighter screams past the B-17's cockpit with maybe 10 feet to spare, so close that Rojohn can feel the prop wash shake the yoke in his hands. Got him! Sawinski screams triumphantly. Scratch one, Kraut! The damaged Messerschmitt rolls over on its back and falls away, trailing smoke and pieces of cowling. Rojohn watches it drop, spinning now, out of control. He doesn't see a parachute. The pilot is probably dead already from Sawinski's burst, or too low to bail out safely. One down. But there are still 4 more circling, and now they're angry. The remaining Messerschmitts attack in a coordinated swarm, coming in from multiple directions simultaneously, too many targets for the gunners to engage them all. Cannon shells and machine gun rounds tear into Mi Amigo from 3 directions at once. The noise is incredible, the hammering of their own guns, the tearing sound of incoming rounds hitting aluminum, the steady roar of 4 straining engines. The number 4 engine, the outboard engine on the right wing, suddenly coughs and belches black smoke. The propeller continues to windmill, but the engine RPM drops precipitously. Number 4's hit, Leak shouts. Oil pressure dropping fast, cylinder head temperature rising. Rojohn's hand is already moving to the engine controls, pulling back the throttle on number 4, hitting the feathering button to stop the propeller before the engine tears itself apart. The propeller blades slowly rotate to their feathered position, aligned with the airflow to reduce drag, and the engine shudders to a stop. 3 engines now. They're flying 2 locked B-17 seconds on 3 engines, carrying 16,000 pounds of bombs and being shot to pieces by German fighters. We can't take much more of this, Smith says, stating the obvious. But what choice do they have? They can't bail out. They can't surrender. You can't surrender from an airplane. They can only keep flying, keep fighting, keep trying to reach Allied territory before something vital breaks or the German fighters finish them off. Another fighter makes a pass, this one targeting the other B-17 locked beneath them. Rojohn can see the tracers arcing down into Skogsberg's aircraft, see the impact flashes as rounds hit home. He wonders how bad the damage is to the other bomber, whether Skogsberg and his crew are going through the same hell, fighting the same desperate battle. Navigator, how far to Allied lines? Rojohn asks. 75 miles, sir, Foley responds. Maybe 20 minutes at our current speed. 20 minutes. It might as well be 20 hours. The Messerschmitts circle again, lining up for another attack. Rojohn can see more German fighters in the distance, climbing up to join the fight. This is going to get worse before it gets better, if it gets better at all. Then, impossibly, salvation appears. Aircraft at 10 o'clock high, one of the waist gunners shouts. Multiple aircraft. They're P-51 seconds, American fighters. Rojohn snaps his head left, looking up through the side window. Yes, there they are. 4 Mustangs, maybe 5, diving down out of the sun, their polished aluminum skins gleaming in the winter light. The cavalry has arrived. The American fighters tear into the Messerschmitts with the fury of avenging angels. One P-51 latches onto the tail of a German fighter that was lining up for another pass at the bombers. The Mustang's 6 .50 caliber machine guns open up, and the Messerschmitt comes apart in midair, pieces of wing and fuselage tumbling away. The other German fighters break off immediately, diving away, trying to escape. But the P-51s are faster, more maneuverable, and their pilots are clearly experienced. It's not even a fair fight. In less than a minute, 2 more Messerschmitts are smoking and falling, and the remaining German fighters are fleeing east at full throttle with Mustangs on their tails. One of the P-51 pulls up alongside Mi Amigo, formate on their wing. The pilot, Rojohn, can see his scarf fluttering in the cockpit, his hand raised in a wave, gets a good look at the 2 locked B-17s. Even through his oxygen mask, Rojohn can see the pilot's expression of shocked disbelief. The P-51 pilot holds up his radio and points to it, then holds up his hands in a questioning gesture. He's trying to ask if they're okay, if they need help, what the hell happened. Rojohn waves back, gives a thumbs up. We're okay. For now. Keep the fighters off us. The P-51 pilot nods, gives a sharp salute, then peels away to rejoin his flight. The Mustangs form a protective circle around the 2 locked bombers, flying top cover, making sure no more German fighters get close. We've got escort, Smith says, relief flooding his voice. We've got fighter cover. Don't get comfortable. Rojohn replies, we're not out of this yet. We're still losing altitude, we've lost an engine, and we've still got to figure out how to land this thing. Altitude 13,000, Leak confirms. Descent rate holding at 700 feet per minute. We've dumped about half our fuel now. 13,000 feet, they've fallen 14,000 feet since the collision. They're getting close to the altitude where they'll be in range of German light flak and small arms fire. And they're still over enemy territory. How's our damage? Rojohn asks, addressing all crew positions. Sound off by station. I need to know what we're working with. The reports come in one by one. Nose section, damaged but intact. Top turret, operational. Radio room, minor damage. Radio still working. Waist guns, operational but low on ammunition from the fighter attack. Tail section, significant damage to the elevator control cables and tail structure, but still controllable. Ball turret, jammed and inoperative. It could be worse. It could always be worse. But it's bad enough. All right, Rojohn says, his mind racing through possibilities. We've got about 60 miles to Allied territory. We're descending at 700 feet per minute, which means we've got, 18 minutes before we're at ground level? We need to start thinking about landing options. Navigator, where's the closest Allied airfield? That would be B58 inches Belgium, sir, Foley responds. Emergency strip about 80 miles west-southwest. But sir, there's no way we can land these 2 aircraft together. The landing gear can't handle the combined weight. We'll collapse the gear and cartwheel down the runway. I know that, Rojohn says, which means we need to separate before we land. Smith, thoughts? The co-pilot stares at him. Sir, we tried separating after the collision. The aircraft are interlocked. If we try to force it, we'll tear both aircraft apart. Then, we find a way to do it that doesn't tear us apart, Rojohn says. We've got 18 minutes to figure it out, and I'm open to suggestions. The intercom is silent. No one has an answer. No one has ever faced this situation before. There's no procedure, no checklist, no training for flying 2 B-17s locked together and trying to separate them without killing everyone aboard. They're gonna have to invent the procedure as they go, and they're gonna have to do it in the next 18 minutes, or they're gonna die trying. 12,000 feet. The altimeter continues its relentless unwinding as the 2 locked B-17s descend through the cold December sky. Below them, the German countryside spreads out in patches of white snow and brown earth, small villages and farms connected by narrow roads. It looks almost peaceful from up here, like a child's model railroad layout. But Rojohn knows every one of those villages has German soldiers. Every road could have a flak battery or anti-aircraft position. They're running out of sky, running out of time, running out of options. All right, listen up, Rojohn says into the intercom, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. We need to separate from the other aircraft before we try to land. The question is how to do it without killing everyone. I need ideas, and I need them now. No suggestion is too crazy at this point. There's a moment of silence, then Technical Sergeant Leek speaks up. Sir, what if we tried a controlled descent? Both aircraft pitch down together, build up speed, then pull up hard. Maybe the G-forces would break us apart? Maybe, Rojohn considers. But if the airframes are as interlocked as you described, The G-forces that would break us apart might also break both aircraft structurally. We could pull the wings off. What about cutting the metal? Smith suggests. Do we have any tools that could cut through the locked sections? We have a crash axe, someone calls its buyers, from the waist gunner position. But sir, to get to the connection point, someone would have to go outside the aircraft, in flight, at 12,000 feet, in the slipstream. Impossible, or close enough to impossible that it might as well be. The wind speed at 12,000 feet, even with the bombers moving at only 160 miles per hour, would tear a man off the aircraft immediately. And even if someone could hang on, could reach the locked sections, a crash axe wouldn't cut through structural aluminum quickly enough to matter. Altitude 11,000, leak reports. Descent rate still 700 feet per minute. 15 minutes until they hit the ground. 15 minutes to solve an impossible problem. Rojohn stares out at the wing, at the number 3 engine still churning away, and an idea begins to form. A terrible idea. A dangerous idea. But maybe, just maybe, a workable idea. What if we use asymmetric thrust? Rojohn says, slowly, thinking it through even as he speaks. We push our thrust to one side, tell Skogsberg to push his thrust to the other side. Create opposing forces that might torque us apart, instead of just pulling in opposite directions. Smith catches on immediately. A rotational force instead of a linear one. Instead of trying to pull apart like opening a locked door, we're trying to twist apart like unscrewing a jar lid. Exactly, Rojohn says. The question is whether we can generate enough torque to break the interlock without flipping both aircraft upside down in the process. There's only one way to find out, Smith says grimly. Yeah. Rojohn takes a deep breath. Radio, pilot. Chester, can you raise the other aircraft on the command frequency? I need to talk to Captain Skogsberg. Roger, pilot. Trying now. 30 seconds pass. A minute. The altimeter continues to unwind. 10,500 feet. 10,000. Finally, Chester's voice crackles through the intercom. Pilot, radio. I've got the other aircraft on frequency. Patching you through now. Static fills Rojohn's headset. Then a new voice, rough, strained, but clear enough. This is Captain Harry Skogsberg. Aircraft 43-3-8172. Who am I talking to? Captain Skogsberg, this is First Lieutenant Glenn Rojohn, aircraft 43-3-8635. How's your situation over there? About as bad as you'd expect. Skogsberg's voice is tight with tension. We've got significant structural damage, 2 engines damaged, and we're stuck to you tighter than a tick on a dog. I don't suppose you've got any brilliant ideas for getting us apart? As a matter of fact, I do, Rojohn says. But you're not going to like it. He explains the plan quickly. Economically. Use asymmetric thrust to create rotational torque. Mi amigo will apply full power to the left engines, reduce power on the right. Skogsberg's aircraft will do the opposite, full power right, reduced power left. The opposing forces should twist the aircraft relative to each other, hopefully breaking the interlock. That's crazy, Skogsberg says flatly. We could flip both aircraft. We could tear the wings off. We're carrying armed bombs, for Christ's sake. I know, Rojohn says, but if we don't separate, we can't land. And we're at 10,000 feet with a descent rate of 700 feet per minute. In about 14 minutes, this problem solves itself when we hit the ground at 160 miles per hour. You got a better idea? Silence on the radio. Then, no, I don't. All right, Lieutenant, let's try it. But if we die, I'm haunting you in the afterlife. Fair enough, Rojohn says. On my mark, we'll apply the asymmetric thrust. We'll hold it for 10 seconds, then return to normal power settings. If it doesn't work the first time, we'll try again. Ready? As ready as I'm going to be. Rojohn looks at Smith, at Leak, at the instruments spread across the panel. This is it. This is where they find out if they're brilliant or suicidal or possibly both. All crew, pilot, Rojohn announces on the intercom. Brace for violent maneuvering. We're attempting to separate from the other aircraft. Hold on to something and pray this works. His hands move to the throttles. Left inboard, left outboard, he pushes them forward to full power. Right inboard, he pulls it back to half power. Number 4 is already feathered and dead, so he leaves it alone. Applying power in 3, 2, 1. Mark. The engines respond immediately. The two left-right cyclones howl as they push to maximum RPM, their propellers clawing at the thin air. The imbalanced thrust creates an immediate yawing force to the right, which Rojohn counteracts with left rudder, but not completely. He wants some of that yaw, wants that rotational force. Beneath them, he can feel Skogsberg doing the same thing in reverse. The other B-17's right engines spool up, adding their thrust to the rotational torque. The two aircraft begin to twist relative to each other. It's subtle at first, a slight shuddering, a grinding sensation transmitted through the airframe. Then it builds, the locked metal sections begin to move, begin to shift, protesting with groans and shrieks that can be heard even over the engine noise. "It's working!" Leek shouts. "I can see movement in the connection point!" But the aircraft are also rolling. The asymmetric thrust is creating not just yaw, but roll. And both B-17s are tilting to the left, the horizon line through the windscreen beginning to tilt crazily. "Compensate!" Rojohn shouts, hauling back on the yoke, applying right aileron. Smith is doing the same, both pilots fighting to keep the wings level, even as the engines try to twist the aircraft into a death spiral. The grinding, shrieking sound intensifies. Metal is tearing, bending, breaking. Rojohn can hear it through the entire airframe, can feel it through his feet on the rudder pedals, through his hands on the yoke. 5 seconds! Smith counts down. 6, 7. The roll's getting worse. They're at 30 degrees of bank now, 40, the left wingtip dropping toward the earth. Rojohn's arms are trembling with the effort of holding the yoke, of fighting the forces trying to flip them inverted. 8, 9. The altimeter is spinning crazily as they lose altitude in the descending turn. 9,000 feet. 8,500. They're falling faster now, much faster. The descent rate spiking to over 1,500 feet per minute. 10! Smith shouts. Rojohn's hands snap the throttles back to normal settings, equalizing the thrust. The yawing force disappears immediately, but the roll continues for another heartbeat before they can arrest it with the A ailerons. And in that heartbeat, with a sound like the world's largest beer can being torn in half, the two B-17 seconds separate. The release is sudden, violent. Mi Amigo lurches upward as if cut loose from an anchor, the nose pitching up sharply. Rojohn is thrown forward against his harness, then back against his seat. Warning lights flash across the instrument panel. Stall warning. Low oil pressure on number 2 engine. Hydraulic pressure fluctuating wildly. "We're free!" Leek screams. "We're separated! Holy Mother of God!" "We're free!" Through the windscreen, Rojohn can see the other B-17 Skogsberg's aircraft dropping away below them, its damaged top section trailing pieces of metal and fabric. The bomber is yawing hard to the right, Skogsberg clearly fighting for control after the violent separation. But they're apart, two distinct aircraft again, each damaged, each struggling, but no longer locked together in that mechanical death embrace. Rojohn fights to stabilize Mi Amigo. The nose is too high, they're on the edge of a stall. He pushes the yoke forward, getting the nose down, building airspeed. 140 knots, 150, 160. The stall warning light goes out. "Damage report!" Rojohn barks into the intercom. "All stations report." The responses come back quickly, voices overlapping. "Tail section intact, sir, but I've got pieces of the other aircraft's wreckage hanging off our belly. Ball turret is freed up. I can rotate again. Bomb bay doors are damaged, but the bombs are still secure. We've got a hydraulic leak in the left wing, but pressure is holding for now. It's a litany of problems, but they're all survivable problems. The important thing is they're flying under their own control again, no longer bound to another aircraft, no longer one bad maneuver away from mutual destruction. Altitude 7,000 feet? Leek reports, his voice shaking with adrenaline. Descent rate. Jesus, we're climbing. We're actually climbing 500 feet per minute. Rojohn checks the altimeter. Leek is right. Without the weight and drag of the other B-17, Mi Amigo is flying properly again. The 3 remaining engines, numbers 1, 2, and 3, are providing enough thrust to not just maintain altitude, but actually climb. "Where's the other aircraft?" Smith asks, craning his neck to look down. "Do you see them?" Rojohn banks Mi Amigo gently to the left, looking for Skogsberg's bomber. They're about 1,000 feet below and a mile behind, still descending but under control. As he watches, the other B-17 levels off and begins a gentle turn to the west, toward Allied territory, toward home. They made it. Both aircraft made it. Against all odds, against all logic, 20 men who should be dead are still flying. Radio pilot, Rojohn says. Chester, see if you can raise Captain Skogsberg again. Roger, pilot, hailing now. A moment later, Skogsberg's voice comes through the headset, and this time there's something different in his tone. Relief, amazement, perhaps even joy. Lieutenant Rojohn, you crazy son of a bitch. I can't believe that worked. Neither can I, Captain, Rojohn admits. What's your status? We're a flying junkyard, but we're flying. Lost 2 engines in the separation, so we're on 2. Significant structural damage to the top section. We've got a hole in the fuselage you could drive a Jeep through. But we're controllable, and we're heading west. How about you? 3 engines, multiple hydraulic leaks, bomb bay doors damaged, and probably 100 other things we haven't discovered yet. But we're climbing, we're controllable, and we've still got our bombs. Speaking of which, I need to get rid of these things before we try to land. Roger that. We're gonna jettison ours over unpopulated territory. These farms below look empty enough. Agreed. Let's get these bombs off before they decide to go off on their own. Rojohn switches back to the intercom. Bombardier, pilot. Fisher, can you jettison the bombs now? We're over sparsely populated countryside. Pick a field away from any buildings and drop them safe. Roger, pilot. Fisher responds from the nose. Arming switches to safe. Bomb bay doors are jammed, but I think I can blow them open with the emergency release. Stand by. There's a pause, then a metallic clang that reverberates through the entire aircraft. The bomb bay doors blow open, or partially open, hanging at an awkward angle from their damaged hinges. Cold air rushes into the fuselage. Bombs away, Fisher announces. Rojohn feels the aircraft lurch upward as 8,000 pounds of dead weight falls away. He watches in the mirror as the bombs tumble down toward the German countryside far below, 20 bombs in a stick, spinning lazily as they fall. They hit a snow-covered field and just sit there, inert, safe, no longer his problem. The relief is overwhelming. They've dropped the bombs. They're no longer flying an armed bomb. If they crash now, it'll just be an airplane crash, not a massive explosion visible from orbit. We're lighter now, Leak observes, checking the instruments. Airspeed is increasing. We're at 8,000 feet and climbing at 700 feet per minute. 8,000 feet. They've regained 1,000 feet since the separation. With the bombs gone and the fuel load reduced from the earlier dumping, Mi Amigo is flying better than it has since the collision. Navigator, pilot, Rojohn calls. Foley, what's our position and how far to Allied lines? Calculating now, sir. A pause as Foley works his charts. We're approximately 40 miles from the front lines. At our current speed and course, about 15 minutes to friendly territory. But sir, we've got a problem. Of course they do. What problem? We dumped too much fuel earlier. We've got maybe 30 minutes of flying time left, 40 if we're lucky, and the engines are sipping fuel. We're not gonna make it back to England. We might not even make it to Belgium. Rojohn does the math quickly in his head. 15 minutes to Allied territory, plus whatever time it takes to find an emergency airfield and set up an approach. They'll be running on fumes. Find me the closest possible landing site, Rojohn orders. I don't care if it's a grass strip or a highway. We need wheels down options within 30 minutes. Yes, sir. Working on it. The 4 P-51 Mustangs are still flying escort, 1 on each wing, 2 above, providing top cover. One of the P-51 pilots pulls up alongside again, close enough that Rojohn can see his face. The pilot gives an exaggerated wipe of his brow. Whew. Then a thumbs up, then points west and makes a landing motion with his hand. Rojohn returns the thumbs up and points west. Yes, we're going home. Or at least, toward home. Sir, I've got something, Foley calls out. There's an emergency landing strip designated A92 near the town of Offelven in Belgium. It's a former Luftwaffe field that the Allies captured 2 months ago. It's about 35 miles west-southwest of our current position. The field is listed as operational for emergency landings. Can we make it on our fuel? It's going to be close, very close. But it's our best option. The alternative is finding a field somewhere and trying to belly land in snow and mud. Rojohn looks at the fuel gauges. The needles are hovering just above empty. Leek wasn't exaggerating. They've dumped most of their fuel, and what remains is being consumed rapidly by 3 engines working overtime. Give me a heading for Ofuven, Rojohn says. 272 degrees, sir. All right, 272 degrees it is. Rojohn banks Mi Amigo onto the new heading, the damaged bomber, responding sluggishly but obediently. Radio, contact the emergency field at Ofoven. Let them know we're coming in with battle damage and low fuel. We'll need emergency equipment standing by. Roger, sir. Rojohn settles into his seat, hands on the yoke, eyes scanning the instruments. They're not out of danger yet. Low fuel, battle damage, damaged hydraulics, unknown structural integrity. Any one of these could still kill them. But they're alive right now, and that's more than he expected 15 minutes ago. Beside him, Smith lets out a long, shaky breath. I can't believe we pulled that off. We haven't pulled anything off yet, Rojohn says. We still have to land this thing. One crisis at a time, sir. One crisis at a time. Through the windscreen, the German countryside continues to slide by beneath them. Forests, fields, small villages. And then, in the distance, Rojohn sees it, a line of smoke and haze, marking the front lines, the contested boundary between the Allied forces pushing east and the German forces defending their homeland. They're almost there, almost to friendly territory. Altitude 9,000 feet, Leek reports. Fuel. Sir, we're showing empty on the outboard tanks. Inboard tanks have maybe 10 minutes left, possibly less. 10 minutes. They need to cross 40 miles in 10 minutes. Rojohn pushes the throttles forward slightly, coaxing more speed out of the protesting engines. The airspeed indicator climbs to 170 miles per hour, then 175. The engines are screaming, burning fuel at an unsustainable rate. But what choice does he have? They need to reach that emergency field before the engines quit. The front line approaches. Rojohn can see the devastation more clearly now. Shattered trees, cratered fields, the skeletons of destroyed buildings, the detritus of war spread across the landscape like a malignant growth. We're crossing the front, Foley announces. We're over Allied territory. A cheer erupts over the intercom. They made it. They crossed 100 miles of German-occupied territory in 2 damaged B-17 seconds, survived a collision, survived German fighters, separated in mid-air, and made it back to Allied lines. But they're not down yet. There, Smith points ahead. I see the field. 10 o'clock, about 5 miles. Rojohn follows Smith's finger and sees it a narrow strip of concrete or compacted dirt, probably 4,000 feet long, carved out of the Belgian countryside. There are a few buildings, some tents, what looks like a control tower, and emergency equipment. He can see fire trucks and ambulances moving into position. They're expecting us, Rojohn thinks. They know we're damaged. They know this is going to be interesting. Landing checklist, Rojohn orders. Leek, give me landing gear status. The flight engineer works the controls, trying to lower the main landing gear. There's a grinding sound, a hydraulic whine, but the gear indicator lights don't turn green. We've got a problem, Leek says. Hydraulic pressure is too low. The gear won't extend fully. Try the emergency system. Already did. It's not working either. The hydraulic lines must be damaged worse than we thought. Rojohn's jaw tightens. Of course. It can't be easy. It can never be easy. Can we crank them down manually? The nose gear maybe. But the mains? I don't know. The damage might have jammed the mechanism. Try it. We've got maybe 5 minutes to figure this out. Leek disappears aft, heading for the manual gear extension crank. Rojohn continues the approach, lining up with the runway, descending through 5,000 feet, 4,000 feet. The airfield is getting closer, the details clearer. He can see people on the ground now, watching, waiting. Altitude 3,000, Smith calls out. Airspeed 140 knots. Too fast. Rojohn pulls back the throttles slightly, bleeding off speed, but not too much they need to maintain flying speed until they're sure they can make the field. Leek's voice crackles through the intercom, strained with effort. I've got the nose gear down and locked, but the mains won't budge. The crank mechanism is jammed solid. No main landing gear. They'll have to belly land, sliding down the runway on the fuselage, probably tearing off the belly turret, possibly starting a fire, definitely destroying the airplane. But they'll be on the ground. They'll be alive. All crew pilot, Rojohn announces. We're gonna make a belly landing, crash positions, brace for impact. 2,000 feet. The runway stretches out ahead like a narrow ribbon of salvation, and Glenn Rojohn is committed now. There's no going around for another attempt, no time to troubleshoot the landing gear, no fuel to spare for anything except getting this wounded bomber on the ground in one piece. Final approach checklist, Rojohn says, his voice mechanically calm, despite the adrenaline singing through his veins. Smith, call out airspeed and altitude. Roger. 130 knots, 1,800 feet. The Belgian countryside spreads out below them, scattered farmhouses and frozen fields, giving way to the churned mud and emergency buildings surrounding the airstrip. Rojohn can see people running now, ground crews, medics, fire teams, all converging on the runway, preparing for the crash they know is coming. Engineer, secure all loose equipment aft. Rojohn orders. Anything that can move during impact needs to be tied down or thrown out. Gunners, clear your stations and move to crash positions in the radio room. The acknowledgements come back quickly, each crew member moving through the aircraft, grabbing ammunition belts, tools, oxygen bottles, anything that could become a deadly projectile when the bomber hits the ground and grinds to a stop. 120 knots, 1,500 feet. Rojohn adjusts the trim, feeling the mushy response of the damaged elevator controls. The cables are holding, but barely. He can feel the sloppiness in the yoke, the extra play that shouldn't be there. If those cables snap on the approach, the nose will drop and they'll auger straight in. No recovery, no survivors. Don't think about that. Focus on what you can control. Flaps? Smith asks. Negative, Rojohn says. We don't know if the hydraulics will extend them evenly. Last thing we need is asymmetric flaps rolling us on final approach. We'll come in fast and hot. 115 knots, 1,200 feet. The runway is coming up fast now. Rojohn can see the details, the cracks in the concrete, the patched sections, the dark streaks of rubber from previous landings. It looks narrow, much narrower than the wide runways back in England. But it's long enough, and right now, that's all that matters. Fuel? Rojohn asks. Vapor in all tanks, Leek responds, back at his station. Number 2 engine is starting to cough. We've got maybe 90 seconds of power left. 90 seconds. Rojohn does the calculation automatically. At their current descent rate, they'll touch down in about 60 seconds. They'll make it barely. 110 knots. 1,000 feet. The P-51 escorts have peeled off, climbing away to give Mi Amigo room to land. But Rojohn can see them circling overhead. The fighter pilots watching, waiting to see if their battered charges make it down alive. Through the side window, Rojohn catches a glimpse of the other B-17 Skogsberg's aircraft approaching the field from a different angle. The other bomber looks even worse than Mi Amigo. A massive hole torn in its top section, metal skin flapping in the slipstream. But it's flying, descending toward the same emergency strip. Both bombers are coming home. The question is whether both will survive the landing. 105 knots, 800 feet. Too fast. They're still too fast. Without flaps, without the drag from the extended main landing gear, they're coming in hot. Rojohn pulls back the throttles more, feeling number 2 engine sputter and die as the last vapors of fuel run through its cylinders. The propeller windmills uselessly for a moment, then Rojohn hits the feathering button and the blades align with the airflow. 2 engines now. Just numbers 1 and 3, the outboard engines, keeping them aloft for these final seconds. 100 knots, 600 feet. The runway threshold is rushing up to meet them. Rojohn can see the white numbers painted on the concrete runway 09. And beyond that, the waiting emergency vehicles, their lights flashing red and white, 95 knots, 400 feet. All crew, brace, brace, Brace! Rojohn shouts into the intercom. He pulls back the throttles on the remaining 2 engines, cutting power. The engines die immediately, their fuel exhausted, and suddenly the only sound is the wind rushing past the windscreen and the groan of damaged metal as the bomber settles into its final descent. 85 knots. 200 feet. The ground is rising up impossibly fast. Rojohn eases back on the yoke, flaring the nose, trying to bleed off the last of their airspeed before impact. But without the main gear down, the aircraft wants to settle onto its belly immediately. He's fighting against aerodynamics, against physics, against the simple fact that they're a 65,000-pound brick trying to make a gentle landing. 75 knots, 100 feet, the runway threshold passes beneath them. They're over the concrete now. 5 seconds to impact. 4, 3, hold it, Rojohn mutters to himself, hauling back on the yoke. Hold it, hold it. 2 seconds. Mi Amigo's belly touches the runway with a grinding shriek of aluminum on concrete. Sparks fountain out behind them as the ball turret housing the lowest point on the fuselage makes first contact. The impact jars through the entire airframe, throwing Rojohn forward against his harness despite his braced position. The bomber skids down the runway like a giant sled, the concrete tearing away the belly skin, the tortured metal howling in protest. Rojohn fights to keep the wings level, keeps pressure on the rudders to maintain directional control, but there's nothing to steer. With no landing gear, no brakes, just the friction of bare aluminum on concrete, and the aerodynamic surfaces that are rapidly losing effectiveness as the airspeed bleeds away. The world outside the windscreen is a blur of motion. They're sliding sideways now, yawing to the right. Rojohn jams his left foot down on the left rudder pedal, trying to correct, but the damaged cables can't provide enough force. The right wing drops, the wingtip screeching as it touches the concrete. For a terrible moment, Rojohn thinks they're going to ground loop, the wingtip catching and spinning them around, the centrifugal force tearing the aircraft apart. But the wingtip bounces up, and Mi Amigo straightens out, still sliding, still decelerating, but no longer in immediate danger of cartwheeling. 50 knots, 40, 30. The emergency vehicles are racing alongside them now. Fire trucks and ambulances keeping pace with the sliding bomber, ready to respond the instant they stop moving. 20 knots, 10, and then, with one final grinding shudder, Mi Amigo stops. The nose drops slightly, as the nose gear, the only gear they manage to extend, digs into the concrete. The propellers on the dead engines, which have been windmilling throughout the landing, finally stop spinning. Silence. Blessed, incredible silence. For a moment, nobody moves. Nobody speaks. The crew just sits there, frozen, waiting for something else to go wrong, for fire to break out, for the fuselage to collapse, for any of 100 other potential disasters. But nothing happens. They're down. They're stopped. They're alive. Everybody out, now! Rojohn's command breaks the spell. Emergency egress. Fire danger. Move! The crew explodes into motion. The top hatch flies open and men start pouring out leak, scrambling up through the cockpit hatch, the waist gunners tumbling out through the side hatches, the radio operator climbing out through his position. Rojohn and Smith are the last out of the cockpit, making sure everyone else has evacuated first. Rojohn drops through the nose hatch, his feet hitting the concrete, his legs nearly buckling from the adrenaline and exhaustion. He stumbles away from the bomber, putting distance between himself and the aircraft in case it decides to catch fire or explode. But Mi Amigo just sits there on the runway, belly down, looking more exhausted than dangerous. Fuel is dripping from the wing tanks, pooling on the concrete, but there's no fire. The emergency crews are already spraying foam on the fuel, neutralizing the fire risk. Rojohn counts heads automatically. 10 men, his entire crew, all standing, all moving, all alive. A few cuts and bruises probably, and they'll all be sore tomorrow, but alive. Against all odds, all 10 men who climbed into Mi Amigo this morning have survived. Lieutenant Rojohn. Rojohn turns to see a jeep racing toward him, an officer standing in the passenger seat. The jeep skids to a stop, and a captain jumps out, an Air Corps captain with a flight surgeon's insignia. "Your crew, okay?" the captain demands. "Yes, sir. Shaken up but mobile. No serious injuries that I can see." "Good. We've got ambulances standing by anyway. Get your men checked out." The captain looks past Rojohn at the damaged bomber, whistling low. Hell of a landing, Lieutenant. Hell of a landing. When we got the radio call that you were locked together with another aircraft in midair, we didn't think either of you would make it. The other aircraft, Captain Skogsberg's ship, did they land? The captain nods toward the far end of the runway. They're on final approach now. Looks like they've got main gear down, but nose gear collapsed. They're going to do a tail-down landing. Should be interesting. Rojohn turns to watch. Sure enough, there's Skogsberg's B-17 tail, number 43 to 38172, coming in low over the runway threshold. The main landing gear are extended, the two massive wheels looking impossibly small beneath the huge bomber. But the nose gear is up, the nose wheel bay door hanging open and empty. Skogsberg brings the bomber in beautifully, touching down on the main gear first, holding the nose off as long as possible. The bomber rolls down the runway on its main gear, slowing, until finally the nose drops. The nose section hits the concrete with a crunch of metal, and the bomber slides the last 100 feet on its nose in main gear before stopping. Emergency crews race toward it immediately, but there's no fire, no explosion. Just another wounded bomber, down and safe. Both aircraft survived, the captain says wonderingly. Unfreaking believable. Skogsberg's crew is evacuating now, climbing out of hatches, jumping down to the concrete. Rojohn can see Skogsberg himself, a tall man with a captain's bars, standing near his aircraft, looking back at it with the same expression Rojohn probably has on his own face. Disbelief, relief, exhausted gratitude. Their eyes meet across the 100 yards of runway separating them. Skogsberg raises one hand in a salute. Rojohn returns it. 20 men, 2 bombers, one impossible situation. And somehow, impossibly, they all survived. Come on, the captain says. Let's get you and your crew to the medical tent. You've all got stories to tell, and intelligence is going to want a full debriefing. A mid-air collision, flying locked together, separating in flight, and both aircraft landing successfully? This is going to be in the training manuals for decades. Rojohn allows himself to be guided toward the waiting ambulances. His crew is already being checked over by medics, blankets draped around their shoulders, hot coffee being pressed into their hands. They're laughing now, the nervous laughter of men who've survived something that should have killed them. Technical Sergeant Leek sees Rojohn approaching and breaks into a huge grin. Sir, I don't know what you did in a previous life, but you've got the devil's own luck. That was the finest bit of flying I've ever seen. It was team effort, Leek, Rojohn says, accepting a cup of coffee from a medic. Every man did his job. That's why we're standing here. Still, Leek says. 28 missions down, sir. 2 more and you complete your tour. After this, the next 2 should be milk runs. Rojohn takes a sip of the coffee, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. 28 missions. He's beaten the odds 28 times now. But he can't think about the next 2 missions, can't think about the future. Right now, all he can think about is the fact that he's standing on solid ground, breathing cold Belgian air with his crew alive around him. Hey, Lieutenant, one of the waist gunner's buyers is pointing up at the sky. Look, Rojohn looks up. The 4P-51 Mustangs that escorted them home are making a victory pass over the field, waggling their wings in salute. Then they form up and turn east, heading back to their own base, their mission accomplished. Rojohn raises his coffee cup toward them in silent thanks. Those fighter pilots probably saved their lives, driving off the Messerschmitts, giving them the breathing room they needed to separate and make it to Allied territory. So many things had to go right today. So many moments where the wrong decision, the wrong move, would have killed everyone. The decision to try asymmetric thrust, the successful separation, the engine power lasting just long enough to reach the emergency field, the belly landing that could have ended in a fireball but didn't. Luck? Maybe. Skill? Certainly. Divine intervention? Rojohn isn't particularly religious, but after today, he might reconsider. Sir? It's Smith, the co-pilot, standing beside him. The younger man looks like he's aged a decade in the past 2 hours. What you did up there, I just want to say, I don't know how you stayed so calm. I was terrified the entire time. I was terrified too, Rojohn admits. I just didn't have time to show it. Someone had to fly the airplane. Well, you flew the hell out of it, sir. They stand there together, pilot and co-pilot, watching as the ground crews begin the process of assessing the damage to both B-17 seconds. Rojohn can already tell Mi Amigo is a write-off. The belly damage alone would take months to repair. And that's not counting the battle damage, the damaged control cables, the dead engines. The bomber that carried them through 28 missions, that brought them home today against all odds, will probably never fly again. But that's okay. She did her job. She brought her crew home. That's all that matters. In the distance, Rojohn can see Skogsberg walking toward them, his own crew trailing behind. The two groups meet in the middle of the runway, 20 men who shared an experience that no one else could truly understand. Lieutenant Rojohn, Skogsberg says, extending his hand. That was the craziest goddamn thing I've ever been part of, and I've been flying combat missions for 9 months. Rojohn shakes his hand firmly. Likewise, Captain, you're flying up there, holding formation while we were locked together, matching my maneuvers during the separation. That took incredible skill. We're alive because we worked together, Skogsberg says. Both crews, both aircraft, working as one. That's what saved us. The other crews are mixing now, introducing themselves, sharing cigarettes and coffee, each man marveling that they're standing here having this conversation instead of lying dead in a field somewhere in Germany. What happens now? One of Skogsberg's crew asks. Now? Skogsberg looks at Rojohn, then back at his own men. Now we get debriefed by intelligence. They're gonna want to know everything, every detail of the collision, the locked flight, the separation. This is unprecedented. No one's ever done what we just did. And after that, we go back to our bases. We get assigned new aircraft, and in a few days or weeks, we climb back into a bomber and do it all over again. Because that's the job. The words hang in the cold December air. Because that's the job. It's New Year's Eve, 1944. The war is still raging. The bombing campaign continues. Tomorrow, or the next day, or next week, there will be another mission, another target, another flight through the deadly skies over Germany. But not today. Today, they survived. Today, they defied death and won. Today, they proved that courage, skill, and a little bit of luck can overcome even the most impossible odds. Rojohn looks around at the 20 men standing on the runway, his crew and Skogsberg's crew, American boys from farms and cities, mechanics and students and factory workers who became airmen, who became warriors, who became legends. They'll go home someday, if they survive the war. They'll tell their stories to their families, to their children and grandchildren. They'll talk about the day 2 B-17 seconds collided over Germany and flew piggyback, locked together, then separated in midair, and both landed safely. And people will shake their heads in wonder and say, it sounds impossible. But it wasn't impossible. It was just incredibly, terrifyingly difficult. And on December 31st, 1944, 20 men proved they were up to the challenge. The debriefing room at the emergency airfield is cramped and cold, heated only by a small pot-bellied stove in the corner that's fighting a losing battle against the Belgian winter. Glenn Rojohn sits at a rough wooden table, a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands, facing 3 officers from intelligence who are scribbling notes furiously as he recounts the events of the mission. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, says a major with tired eyes and ink-stained fingers. You and Captain Skogsberg's aircraft collided at 27,000 feet over German territory. Instead of separating immediately, you became mechanically locked together. You then flew for approximately 45 minutes as a single unit before successfully separating through asymmetric thrust application. Is that accurate? Yes, sir, Rojohn confirms. That's accurate. And during this time, both aircraft retained their full bomb loads? Yes, sir. 16,000 pounds of high explosives total. We couldn't jettison them initially because the bomb bay doors on my aircraft were jammed by the other aircraft's fuselage. We dropped our bombs after separation over unpopulated German countryside. The major exchanges, glances with the other intelligence officers, a captain and a lieutenant, both looking equally amazed and skeptical. Lieutenant, I've been debriefing bomber crews for 2 years. I've heard stories about aircraft flying home with half a wing shot off, about pilots landing with 3 dead engines, about every kind of battle damage imaginable. But this, he shakes his head. This is unprecedented. You understand that, right? What you and Captain Skogsberg accomplished today has never been done before. I understand that now, sir, Rojohn says. At the time, we were just trying to survive. Walk me through the separation again, the captain says, leaning forward. You applied full power to your left engines and reduced power on your right. Skogsberg did the opposite. The resulting torque broke the mechanical interlock. But how did you know it would work? What made you think of that approach? Rojohn thinks back to those desperate moments at 12,000 feet, watching the altimeter unwind, knowing they had minutes to solve an impossible problem. It wasn't scientific, sir. We couldn't pull apart linearly. The aircraft were too tightly interlocked. So I thought about rotational force, like trying to unscrew a jar lid instead of trying to pull the lid straight off. It was our only option that didn't involve deliberately destroying both aircraft. And the risk of flipping both bombers inverted was significant, Rojohn admits. We got to about 40 degrees of bank before we could arrest the roll, another 10 or 15 degrees, and we would have been inverted with insufficient altitude to recover. But the alternative was hitting the ground still locked together. At least this way, we had a chance. The lieutenant is sketching something on a pad of paper, a rough diagram of two aircraft locked together with arrows indicating thrust vectors and rotation. The aerodynamic analysis alone is going to take weeks, he mutters. The combined weight, the drag coefficient, the asymmetric thrust calculations. This is going to be a case study at every flight school in the Air Force. Lieutenant Rojohn, the major says, his voice taking on a more formal tone. I want you to understand something. What you did today, what both crews did, is going to be remembered. This isn't just another mission report that gets filed away. This is history. You kept your head under impossible circumstances. You made decisions that saved 20 lives, and you demonstrated airmanship of the highest order. There will be commendations, probably medals. The press is going to want to talk to you. Rojohn shifts uncomfortably. Sir, I just did what any pilot would do. Captain Skogsberg, too. We had good crews. Everyone did their jobs. That's the right answer, the major says with a slight smile. But don't be modest to a fault, Lieutenant. What you did required exceptional skill and courage. Own that. The debriefing continues for another hour, the intelligence officers extracting every detail, the exact sequence of events during the collision, the control inputs during locked flight, the fuel consumption rates, the damage assessment, the fighter attacks, everything. They're building a complete picture, documenting every aspect so that future pilots might learn from it, so that procedures might be developed for, God forbid, anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation. Finally, the major closes his notebook. All right, Lieutenant, that's enough for now. We'll need to debrief you again tomorrow, along with your crew members individually. But for tonight, you're dismissed. There's a barracks building with hot bunks, and the mess hall is serving dinner. Get some food, get some sleep, you've earned it. Rojohn stands, his legs stiff from sitting. What about my aircraft, sir? Mi amigo? The major's expression turns sympathetic. I won't lie to you, Lieutenant. The damage assessment team has already looked at both aircraft, yours and Captain Skogsberg's. Neither one is going to fly again. The structural damage is too severe. They'll be salvaged for parts, but as operational aircraft, they're done. Rojohn nods slowly. He expected as much, but hearing it confirmed still hurts. Mi amigo carried him through 28 missions. That bomber was his workplace, his sanctuary, his lifeline. And now she's finished. A broken bird that will never fly again. She was a good ship, Rojohn says quietly. The best, the major agrees. She brought you home when she had every reason to come apart in midair. That's all you can ask of an aircraft. Rojohn salutes and leaves the debriefing room, stepping out into the early evening darkness. It's not quite 1,700 hours, but the December sun has already set, and the temperature is dropping fast. His breath mists in the cold air as he walks toward the barracks, his flight boots crunching on the frozen ground. The emergency airfield is busy despite the late hour. Ground crews are working under floodlights, conducting damage assessments on both B-17 seconds. Fire trucks and emergency vehicles are parked nearby, still on standby. And everywhere Rojohn looks, he sees airmen stopping to stare at the two damaged bombers, pointing, talking in hushed voices about what happened. The story is already spreading. By tomorrow, everyone in the Allied air forces in Europe will have heard about the two B-17 seconds that flew Piggyback. By next week, It'll be in the newspapers back home. The piggyback flight, they'll probably call it. Or the miracle over Germany. Something dramatic and memorable. Rojohn finds his crew in the mess hall, gathered around a table, eating hot food for the first time since breakfast. They look exhausted, faces pale, hands shaking slightly from residual adrenaline, eyes haunted by the close brush with death. But they're alive. They're laughing, telling stories, already beginning to process what happened. "Lieutenant!" Technical Sergeant Leek waves him over. "Sit down, sir. You need to eat something." Rojohn joins them, accepting a plate of something that might be beef stew. It's hot and it's food, and that's good enough. He eats mechanically, listening to his crew recount the mission from their perspectives. "When we first hit, I thought we were done," says Staff Sergeant Sawinski, the top turret gunner. "I mean, you feel an impact like that, you figure that's it. But then we kept flying." Kept flying! I looked down through the turret and I could see the other bomber right there, like we were parked next to each other in midair. "I couldn't rotate the ball turret," the ball turret gunner adds. "Their fuselage was right underneath me. I was stuck looking straight down at their top turret. I could see their gunner in there, staring back up at me. We were that close, maybe 3 feet of clearance. The worst part was the fighters," says Technical Sergeant Mayfield from the tail position. "We couldn't maneuver, couldn't evade, just had to sit there and take it, hoping our guns could drive them off." When those P-51 seconds showed up, he shakes his head. "I've never been so happy to see friendly fighters in my life." Second Lieutenant Smith, the co-pilot, is sitting across from Rojohn, and their eyes meet. Smith raises his coffee cup in a silent toast. Rojohn returns the gesture. No words are necessary. They were there in the cockpit together, fighting the controls together, making life or death decisions together. That creates a bond that doesn't need verbal acknowledgement. "What happens now, sir?" asks Staff Sergeant Byers. "Do we go back to our base? Get a new aircraft?" "Eventually," Rojohn says. "Right now, we're grounded here for debriefing. Intelligence wants to document everything. After that, we'll be transported back to Thorpe Abbotts, get reassigned to a new bomber, and resume operations." "How many missions do you have left, sir?" someone asks. "2, Rojohn says. "This was number 28. 2 more and I'm done with my tour." A murmur runs through the crew. In the 8th Air Force, completing a combat tour of 30 missions is a major achievement. The odds are against you losses are so high that statistically, you're more likely to be killed or captured than to complete your tour. Every mission is a roll of the dice, and the house always has the advantage, but Rojohn has survived 28 rolls. 2 more missions, and he can go home, back to the States, away from flak and fighters, and the daily possibility of death. If he survives those last 2 missions, "We'll get you through them, sir," Leek says firmly. "Whatever aircraft they assign us, whatever the target, we'll get you home." Rojohn nods his thanks, but doesn't reply. He's learned not to make promises about the future in this war. You can't control the future. You can only control how you act in the present moment, how you respond to the challenges in front of you. And right now, in this moment, he's alive, his crew is alive, and that's victory enough. The door to the mess hall opens and Captain Skogsberg enters, followed by his crew. The room falls silent for a moment as the 2 groups, Rojohn's crew and Skogsberg's crew, regard each other. Then, someone starts clapping. 1 person, then 2, then everyone in the mess hall is applauding, standing, honoring the 20 men who survived the impossible. Skogsberg walks over to Rojohn's table, and Rojohn stands to meet him. They shake hands again, and this time, it feels different. Not just 2 pilots who survived a crisis together, but brothers, bound by shared experience that no one else can fully understand. "They're calling it the piggyback flight," Skogsberg says with a wry smile. "Intelligence officer told me, said we're gonna be famous." "Famous," Rojohn repeats. "Great. Just what I wanted. To be famous for almost dying. Could be worse," Skogsberg says. "We could actually be dead." He pauses, then adds more seriously, "Thank you, Lieutenant, for keeping your head up there, for figuring out how to separate us. My crew, we owe you our lives." "We owe your crew the same," Rojohn says. "You matched every maneuver, held formation during the separation, gave us the opposing thrust we needed. It was a team effort. both crews working together. To teamwork then, Skogsberg says, raising his coffee cup. To teamwork, Rojohn echoes, touching his cup to Skogsberg's. They stand there for a moment, two pilots from different squadrons, brought together by chance and circumstance, united by survival. Tomorrow, they'll return to their respective units. They may never fly together again, but they'll always have this moment, this mission, this impossible achievement. The mess hall returns to its normal noise level as people sit back down and resume their meals. But there's a different atmosphere now, a sense of celebration mixed with relief. December 31st, 1944, New Year's Eve. And for 20 American airmen, it's a new year they never expected to see.